Hi, John. Cogir Rancho Cucamonga, right?
That's correct, yes.
Did I pronounce that right?
Yes. The only time it's mispronounced is if you have a British speaking someone on Google. No, you can get people with different accents on Google, and they can never pronounce Spanish names correct.
The artificial intelligence that really isn't that intelligent?
Exactly.
So that is what I guess San Bernardino County.
Yes.
Okay. Close to La La Land, close to Hollywood. You look like an actor, John.
My son's an actor. I'm an architect. It's a completely different thing.
Well, let's start with your son. Tell me about your son, the actor.
He went to UC Riverside got a degree in theater and TV. And he's worked his way through. It's very difficult to plot a career path in that business. Um, he is doing what he's always wanted to do now. He's directing teams who are the voices for video games and anime movies.
That's a huge industry right now.
Well, yes, I mean, from an income point of view, video games are where the money is. Sure.
So is he a techie as well, or a director and actor only?
He's a director and actor, but of course he uses a lot of tech. He just finished doing a program where the lead voice actor was in Scotland, and he's in Los Angeles. Other people are in New York, so you have to get all the time zones coordinated so everybody can work together at the same time frame. So
Interesting. Recently, I interviewed Seth MacFarlane, and
oh yeah.
I was asking about doing voice work, and I said, "Is that easier because you're not on camera?" He said, "No, it's tougher because you don't have the visual aid."
Well, what he's doing, a lot of what my son is doing is dubbing Korean and Japanese films and video games.
Oh boy.
And so he has to watch them in Japanese to get understand the inflections and all this. And then, of course, it has to be dubbed so that it looks like people are actually speaking English.
Does he
So
understand the language? Does he?
no,
No.
no, but he understands the emotion.
You guys grew up around show business, California. Your son grew up in California.
Yes, well, both our boys were born in Wisconsin. We lived in Wisconsin from 66 to 80.
Okay.
And in 1980, we returned to California. And so he was, well, 1980. I think he was 11 or so. And then, so he went through middle school and high school and college. We were living in San Diego.
Got it.
And then the week after he finished college, we moved back to Northern California. I'm from the Bay Area originally.
So I want to get back to Wisconsin, but before we get off the showbiz stuff, Rancho Cucamonga, that 70s show. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was filmed in Rancho Cucamonga.
I know about this. I didn't really watch it very much. I didn't know it was filmed here. I moved when I finished college, which was the military. I moved to LA in the fall of '63, and I had reserve. I was in the Air Force Reserve, so I had monthly meetings in Riverside. So I would drive through Rancho Cucamonga.
All right.
And it was all vineyards, and it was also either a Johnny Carson joke because it had a funny name. Cucamonga had a funny name.
I remember that. I remember that. And I also remember, and I'm sure you do too, being a young man in the 1960s, Frank Zappa. He's from Rancho Cucamonga.
I didn't know that.
And
Rancho Cucamonga is interesting because they effectively built a brand new city modeled somewhat on Irvine, because Irvine was really the first brand new city in California. And so the roads work, the utilities work. I mean, it's beautifully landscaped. And 175,000 people live here, which really surprised me. It doesn't feel that size.
the populated area around San Bernardino County is millions.
Well, that's now called the Inland Empire. When we lived in Poway, which is near Rancho Bernardo in northern San Diego County. And Temecula, was just country when we lived there, and then they started putting in vineyards and that kind of thing. And then, of course, there was this huge boom in construction for housing and all the rest, just to accommodate all the population.
I remember when Temecula was considered cowboy country.
It was. When I lived in the area, it was.
And the area that's really just exploding right now is around Indio and Palm Springs with Coachella and Stagecoach. That entire area, the population is just booming right now.
Well, it's more cost effective
Yeah.
for sure, and it's been developed enough that there's lots of things to do there. And when we'd lived in Northern California uh, for 25 years, and then we wanted to move back closer to our son, and it was either the mountains or the desert.
Right.
And so the mountains were closer. And so now that we're here, we lived in Lake Arrowhead, which is 40 miles from here. His house is 40 miles from here in LA. So it's a very convenient location, easy to get to places.
The Bay Area, where I'm pretty familiar with it, John. Where were you at in the Bay Area?
I lived in Millbrae, which is near San Francisco International Airport,
Absolutely.
and went to the San Mateo Unified School District, is San Mateo to San Bruno. And in the 40s and 50s, everything was available. If you wanted to apply yourself, almost everything was available. So it was a great place to go to K-12 school.
So you mentioned that you're an architect, and
Yes,
you mentioned Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I didn't hear any accent because you're California based,
I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area,
right?
and we all sound like radio announcers. We have no accent. And we moved to Milwaukee, and my wife's from Michigan, and people round their vowels. Uh, and it just sounds different. And then, of course, their diction is really not that great. So, but it was interesting because in the 60s, you're young in the 60s in LA, and there's all this role playing and this kind of thing. And you move to the Middle West, and either people liked it or they didn't. It was really refreshing. So it was a good experience for us.
Young in the 60s, and you mentioned California, LA. Is that where you met Mary?
Yes.
How many
Yeah,
years married now? 2 years?
63. She she decided she wanted an adventure, and she was living in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she decided to try out living in Southern California. So she moved there in the fall of 63, and I moved there in the fall of 63. And then we met at a young adults group at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church on Wilshire Boulevard. And one thing led to another for the next year or so, and we decided to get married, and we stayed there another year, and then decided we needed an adventure. And my sister lived in Washington, D.C., but there was a recession on both coasts. The architecture profession, except for certain specific building types, is feast or famine. An opportunity came up in Milwaukee. I got the job on the phone.
Were you like,
And-
Milwaukee, snow, freezing? Why do I want to go to Milwaukee?
Well, I didn't move there for the weather.
Yeah, right.
But Milwaukee's interesting because it's on the west side of Lake Michigan, so you don't get lake effect snow, and as a result, it gets bitter cold the end of January for about 2 weeks. It was nice to have 4 seasons. The weather really doesn't bother me one way or another, and so it was just part of the adventure. And I worked for a company that did schools and industrial engineering type of education buildings.
You were commercial, right, John? Commercial architecture?
No, it was institutional,
Oh,
not commercial.
okay.
Then moved from that into hospitals. I was working for a firm that had many offices in the United States, and as a result, they got kind of once-in-a-lifetime projects. So we did the first urban national park in Indiana Dunes. We did an embassy in Washington. We did a school district in Wyoming, those kind of things. And we were the master planners for a medical center in Milwaukee. And an opportunity came up to work with the team that was doing a brand new 300-bed hospital. So I went with them. That really got my foothold in hospital design.
What a career.
And,
You're way too smart for me.
oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, I guarantee it.
I'm sitting in this chair, but you're sitting in that
And that proves it that you're smarter than I am.
one. So anyway, our oldest boy had health issues that couldn't be addressed effectively in Wisconsin. And so an opportunity came up in San Diego, and UCSD Medical Center had the services that he needed. And so, and I was 40 and I had ants in my pants. And so, uh, professionally. And so we made the move, and it was a smart move. And that's where my wife got interested in horseback riding and had things that she liked to do.
Tell me about you and Mary and stuff that you like to do together. And John, tell me the secret of 63 years. I heard that you were married in
65.
Oh, I was thinking 1963.
No, oh no, that's when we met. No, we were married in 65.
Okay, so 60. Wow. Okay. Congratulations.
Well, you know, if you look at life as an adventure, marriage is part of that. And we were a good balance for each other because I had confidence in my professional abilities, but not in my social skills. And my wife was the opposite. She had terrific social skills. And so it made a good combination for us. She's very outgoing, and it's, you know, it meets people easily, this kind of thing. And then when we moved to Wisconsin, she was more at home because the environment was similar to what she had grown up with in Michigan. Her folks were 6 hours away, and we'd see them every couple of months. And then it took us a little while, and our first child was born 4 years after we married. And then 3 years after that, we had our second boy.
The 60s, were you a hippie?
No, no, no.
You
Well,
didn't.
you know, it's interesting you should ask that question. I graduated from UC Berkeley in January of 63. There was a whole attitude for young people that carried over from the Kennedys when the Kennedys were in office. And after that, well, I graduated in January, went in the military for 6 months, moved to LA in September, and in November was JFK's assassination. After that, things started really falling apart. And quite frankly, I didn't really understand that, because you had all these kids that had grown up in a really terrific time. I mean, after the Second World War, they were too young for Korea, you know. But I talked to a friend of mine who went back to Cal for a master's in 65, and he said, I would not have recognized the campus. That's when they were having all
Protests and
kinds of political nonsense.
Vietnam era protests, coming up on the summer of love in 69, just after you had your second child.
Well, we
And
were in the Middle West, so they didn't impact us that much.
right.
But
But UC Berkeley, if you had to put a pin on a map and say this is Hippieville, that would be
well,
it.
there's one thing I can always tell you is that majority of people who were protesting were not students, and that in the fall, the stadium was 50,000 people, was full every Saturday. And so it wasn't a unique, you know, a whole shift.
Right.
So I was kind of lucky because I was ahead of that curve before all those kinds of things happened. The other thing that happened in architecture is that they decided to teach sociology for 10 years, in part because of that, and throughout colleges in California. They were teaching sociology instead of design. And so when I moved to LA, or I moved to San Diego in the 80s and was trying to hire people, the only ones with design skills were from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo.
Oh.
Because everybody else, you know, was in tune with, you know, the mood of the day. Well, that isn't gonna help you when you're trying to create these buildings to support people. So
Yeah. Fun stuff. Take me back to 1965, 60 years ago, the year that you and Mary were married. Fun stuff. What music did you enjoy together? What was your favorite music then?
we like to dance. And one of the things we really enjoyed when we were in LA was they had a lot of these small bars that had bands and a lot of Latin music and Latin dancing, that kind of thing. And we loved that. That was a lot of fun. And then when we moved to the Middle West, people like to party.
Yes, they do. They drink some beer
and
in the Middle West.
and my father-in-law, God bless him, made terrific Manhattans. And so, and of course, we lived in Milwaukee where either you're Catholic or you're Lutheran. And so on Friday nights, there were fish fries and all kinds of activities for the weekend. And it was easy to have a vital social life. And so we enjoyed that very much. And then after I'd been there 6 years, I guess, the office I worked for had a branch in Appleton in the Fox River Valley, 20 miles from Green Bay, where the Packers are. And so we moved there for a couple of years.
Tell me about the
Well,
community, the Cadence community, Cogir community in Rancho Cucamonga.
Well, for a number of reasons, my wife was unable to walk, and it was part of a neurological illness that she has. And so we went through the home health and all these other kinds of things in Lake Arrowhead, which is a lovely place, but it doesn't have the population to support a lot of healthcare, home care things. We contacted a Place for Mom. Place for Mom gave us a list, and Cadence was on the list. My son and I interviewed 7 and talked to Willie here and narrowed it down to 3. And we went to one for breakfast. And then we went here to Cadence for lunch. Willie and Cynthia touched on every single thing we were interested in, concerned about, all that kind of thing. We took a tour of the building and then we went upstairs to go see the apartment.
Yep.
And there's a lady here who's a very skilled watercolorist. And she just happened to be standing by her door with all her displayed of her lovely paintings when I walked by. And so she introduced herself and I had a chance to visit with her. And of course, she's very interested and supportive of the community that we have here. And then we went to look at the apartment, which we decided we'd flip the way it was furnished so that the living room and dining room would become the bedroom, because at the time we had a big electric king size bed.
Yeah, it's your choice
And
how
then-
you configure the apartment. Right.
And that way the caregiver could come in right over to the left side of the bed, and
Oh,
it
nice.
just worked well for all those things. And then the bedroom became, the TV, dressing, library, office, all that kind of thing for me.
And John, that had to bring comfort to you having care right there for Mary when needed.
Well, I'll tell you, number one, you have, of all the places you went, you have by far the best marketing team, period. Cynthia came to visit us at lunch and gave us a list of places where we could turn our country dog into a city dog. She turned my wife's wheelchair around to meet a whole group of ladies,
That's
ladies
great.
reaching out and grabbing their hands.
Oh, I love that.
So, so that made a big difference. Then now that we're here, the dining room's great, the people are friendly, and the caregivers are very, very good. And we've been very pleased with that. And when we reached the point that we had to go to appointments outside, then Michael was there with the van to take us. That worked out, very comfortably for my wife. And he's a great guy. And so we really feel at home here. Now, we have been here 18 months. And for the last year, my wife has been in hospice here. And that was a seamless integration with the hospice people. And they also use the med techs. I was handling the medication. So now that she's in hospice, the med techs here provide the service. And she's now on a liquid diet in the last week. So the fellow who's in charge of all the aides talked to the hospice people, and they're providing all the food service for her now as part of that service. So the whole seamless thing has been made it effortless for us. The big thing for us is we were going to leave a house in a particular lifestyle and then move here. And we decided the best way to do that was to do more or less everything at once, rip the Band-Aid off and just do it.
Big change.
Well, there are people here I've become friends with that are doing it on an incremental basis. I think that would have been very hard for us. We put the house on the market. It sold in 4 months, which was important because we used the profit to invest that so that we could have income to afford to live here. It's satisfying here, even though there's not the big house and all your local friends. I mean, we've met friends here. I've met a lot of very nice people here. And so the thing that I'm concerned about is that as my wife fades, I don't want to be isolated. And that's one of the benefits here, is that you don't feel isolated. They have a lot of activities, and I haven't been going. I go to exercise because I need it.
Me too.
And it works. I haven't going to a lot of other things because I've been busy, just being with my wife and things like that. But I will start doing more and more of those things, especially now that she's on a liquid diet. I'll be taking all my meals downstairs in the dining room, which will be nice. Before, I was picking up lunch and dinner and taking it up and preparing it for her and eating it up and all that kind of stuff. So I think the transition is inherent here. As things become less and less involved with her, I'll have opportunities to meet and do more things with.
I think so too. And I'm happy for you. Cadence Rancho Cucamonga, a Cogir community. John, our heartfelt best to Mary. And in the dining room, knowing your Milwaukee background, I have to ask, do they have bratwurst, Schlitz, Old Milwaukee, and Pabst?
No.
That might be a good thing. Well, John, I enjoyed talking to you again, sincerely. Our very best to Mary, to you both.